Hello, and welcome to the Table and Well podcast. I'm Tennyson.
And I'm Janelle. Thank you for joining us as we discuss topics and give practical tools that help you live, grow, and be in healthy, joy-filled relationship with God, yourself, and others.
For more information and resources, or if you're looking for coaching, connection, and community, please visit tableandwellco.com. We hope you enjoy this podcast. Hey guys, thank you for joining us today for the Table and Well podcast. This is episode number 16 of season 2, Stories from the Table. And as always, please feel free to download and subscribe to this podcast from your favorite listening platform. And if you would like to be watching us on YouTube, or if you are watching us on YouTube, please check us out there on our YouTube channel, which is Table and Well Co. So this is part 2 of our conversation with our friends Richard and Carolyn Hyde from Israel. And if you didn't listen to the first one, I want to encourage you to go and do that because it was absolutely amazing. I actually forgot how much I enjoy listening to them and listening to their stories, and how they tell stories is just amazing. So in this episode, we're going to hear some more stories, hence the title, and just that's who they are. But we're going to be talking about just how they actually embody the table. Like everywhere they go, they've lived in multiple countries. They've done a ton of things, and in every place they've been, they've always incorporated a table. They've always invited people in. They've always created safety and security and connection for those around them. You're going to hear some really great stories. Some stories that they talk about when they lived in Germany. They also, again, like I said, they live in Israel, and they host people in their homes for tours and things like that for the Holy Land. And the stories and what they've experienced has been absolutely amazing. Some of these stories are, well, they're all fantastic, but some of them you could write stories about or write a movie about and watch them and be completely enthralled and riveted through the entirety of the movie. So I'm going to get out of your way and let you guys listen to Carolyn and Richard as they share with us their stories from the table.
So what does the table look like for you guys now in your normal rhythm of life, whether it's the Shabbat table, or tell us a little bit about that.
It's like a rhythm here when we meet new people, or and it could be believers, it could be pre-believers. Just inviting them over for a meal and sitting around this table. And I wish we could show you the view, but it's night outside now in the Galilee. But it is gorgeous, just gorgeous. And then
the lake.
Sitting around the table. Actually, our tent making ministry that supports all the outreach that we do with our sons is up on the roof. You know, in the Bible, it talks about the flat roofs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have one of those.
Oh, wow.
So when we host tour groups in our home, we have a time of worship and sharing testimonies, and then we go upstairs to the roof, and we have tables set up there.
Wow.
And we serve dinner with this incredible view. And sometimes people don't want to leave, and we kind of have to
shoo them out. Yeah.
Don't you know that's when it's a good Shabbat, is when nobody wants to leave and everybody wants to sleep under the table? Isn't that, or is that just Passover?
Another thing we do when the groups come over is we teach them Israeli folk dancing.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing when you get up and you're doing the same movements together in rhythm, and it connects people's, physically and spiritually. It connects their hearts. And then sitting around the table
after dancing
is so powerful.
Yeah, because dancing, I think Jim Wilder said this with today. It opens the relational circuits. And the thing is, when you're dancing in a circle and you can see everyone, we're all ashamed together because none of us can dance. And so we're all like on an equal playing field. Nobody's better. And it really does break down the walls.
Yeah, there's so much happening in the brain when you're rhythmically dancing in a group like that. And something about it being circular as well, which is so fun to me because that has existed in Jewish culture forever.
Yeah.
And we're just now getting to see inside the brain to understand why the Lord, created that as part of the everyday. And we got to do that actually at the Thrive conference. And there was probably a couple, at least 100
About
people
100
there.
people in there. Yeah.
And so we were in a giant gym and circles and circles and circles of people, four circles deep dancing.
We
in
did
rhythm.
that too.
We did that too. In fact, this is how serious it is. When our older son was getting married, and we love our daughter-in-law, we love her family, great, great people. But her grandfather was a very staunch Baptist, and he was like, there will be no dancing. And when I heard that, I mean, they're getting married in Israel. We're inviting, pre-believer friends. And it was like, there will be dancing.
Oh, yes, there will be.
Mm-hmm.
At the
funeral. Right. At the wedding.
Be that person's funeral.
I was shocked. I mean, this was like, there's no way we will dance at the wedding.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did you see, just out of curiosity, just a little side note, but what did you see happen when you guys did dance together? People who maybe didn't have a value for it before, and this whole idea of combining two families together and all of that. How did dance play into that?
Well, we had to explain what the dance was.
Yeah.
Because their notion in the Baptists, I guess, I don't know, I'm not Baptist, but their notion was, some kind of like, I don't know, kind of lewd dancing kind of thing. And, we don't want that either.
Right.
But Israeli folk dancing is not lewd at all. It's wholesome, family oriented. You're holding hands, you're in a circle, or you're in a line dance.
Yeah.
And so when they heard that, then they were okay with that.
Okay.
When we have these groups come into our home, and they're dancing, when they finish, the smile on their faces are from here to here. I go around and give everybody a high five. It's an amazing connection with people.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's what the table is.
Yeah. So that when we sit down at the table, the ice is already broken. And the table is like a friendly place.
Yeah. You've made friends by that point.
Yeah. You've seen each other, literally and figuratively, because you're in a circle and where you're looking out, everyone's in front of you, you're making eye contact or not eye contact, depending on what's happening.
How hard it is.
But you've connected, you've seen each other in a very vulnerable, raw space of not being good at something maybe and having fun still, and then laughing about it together. And just so much happens. And then I can imagine doing that and then coming to the table and then moving into whatever those rhythms may be. Then there's so much probably freedom and connection in those.
And it builds camaraderie. You're already like a team when you sit down at the table.
You're one, right? There creates a oneness of humanity prior to even sharing a word.
And then when they hear my testimony, which is kind of a hard testimony for some Christians. I mean, I grew up hating Christians. And I know there are a lot of Christians who grew up hating Jews, because people learn it from their family background if they're anti-Semitic. And so there's a scripture in Ephesians 2 that talks about the two shall be one, and that wall of hostility will come down. And that's what has separated us. In fact, speaking of the table, when I grew up, we were never invited into anyone's home, and except Jewish people, obviously. And we never invited anyone who wasn't Jewish into our home to sit around the table. And I'm sure if we were invited into a Gentile's home, my parents would have refused. The only Gentile who was ever in our home that I can remember was maybe a plumber or electrician or somebody to fix something. But that's it. We never sat at a table together.
Wow.
And that's really, speaking of Ephesians 2, the wall of hostility was even in my time, like growing up.
And isn't that interesting? Yes. And isn't it interesting though, that like part of what is like is a picture of that is the fact that you can't sit around a table. And the difference being that you can, just even the significance of why the table is this unifying oneness, we're together space, and that when we can't sit together at a table versus when we can, that there is a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Also, one other thing regarding the table that was a red flag for us in the Messianic congregation, that we planted one in our home, and it grew to about 320 people.
Wow.
Was when we would meet people who they were Christians, but they got so enamored with Judaism, then they started to take their eyes off of Jesus. And the first red flag we would notice would be they would say, "Oh, we can't eat with you."
Oh, wow.
Because we keep kosher. See, what they took on the rabbinical kosher thing, which is really not biblical kosher. But what it did when they couldn't eat, it separated fellowship. That was it. You were finished then.
Wow.
And that
interesting.
was a big red flag to us. If people got to that point where we can't eat with you.
And they say it's because we want to keep kosher, but there's it has other more ramifications. Yeah.
Right. But isn't it interesting how Jesus, so much of what he did when he was here was blast through all of that. He's like, "Oh, let's eat together. It doesn't matter." And so many people are like, whoa, wait.
Why are you eating over there?
With them?
Why are you eating
sit with them?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, absolutely, I do."
Man.
But then on the other way, when you think about this, he said, to drink my blood and eat my flesh. For Jews, that was like, what?
Right.
But so he used it in a way as like the type of connection you need to have with me is that no matter what, that we're together. Nothing's going to separate us. From connecting with one another. Yeah. So it's interesting, kind of both ways.
And even at the Last Supper, it's kind of interesting. I mean, people have no idea that was a Passover Seder.
Yes.
Yep.
And where were they? They were reclining at the table, because that's one of the things you do at Passover. You're supposed to kind of slouch. That's when you get the only time where your grandparents can't tell you to sit up straight.
Passover.
You're allowed to slouch.
Isn't that
wow.
And so when we say, when Yeshua said, "This night one of you will betray me," and all the disciples said, Who, Lord? And he said, "The one who dips with me." I always like to tell people they weren't having salsa and chips.
Right.
So more than likely, they were either dipping the parsley into the salt water, which represents the tears that we shed in slavery, or they were dipping the matzah into the choroset, which is the sweet apple and cinnamon mix that represents the mortar.
Yeah.
Probably it was the matzah into the marar, the bitter herbs, because that was Judas Iscariot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So powerful. We've had the privilege of hosting Passover for 3 or 4 years now.
3 years now. Yeah.
And there's something just so beautiful about it that like beckons to something inside of you that just like stills the earth and sets everything else aside, all the things we do every day that keep us busy and disconnected from him, disconnected from each other, disconnected from the story that we're a part of, the redemption story that we're walking out every single day and we're completely unaware of because we're busy doing the thing, and there's just something so incredible about it. And you just have to chuckle at the way that the Lord sets the table and sets the story to be such that that would be where Jesus would spend his last days with those he loved. And
his last meal was the Passover meal. Yeah.
Yes. Passover is so significant. It is, you have your once a year Christians who go to church once a year, I guess Christmas or Easter.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you've got your once a year Jews, and or maybe twice a year. They'll either go to a Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah service or a Passover. And it's even when we lived in Germany, we did a Passover. You want to tell them about that? Because that was a powerful.
Well, there's just real quick. So our neighbor was a historian, and he took us on a tour one day in this little village north of Munich.
This is where the Lord settled us, 15 minutes outside of Dachau.
And he took
Wow.
us, he took us to a hotel that belonged to the mayor, and it also had belonged to his father, which also was the mayor. And his father was a good friend of Hitler, and it was in this hotel that some of the final solution was mapped out right in that hotel. And so when I heard that, I said, we're going to have a Passover Seder. We're going to redeem this place.
Wow.
Of course, nobody knew what that was. And when we'd go and talk to the churches, they're all Catholic, Passover, what are you talking about? Or we'd go to sell the tickets. They did that in the bookstores, and they'd look at it and they go, "Was ist das?" You know what it is, You're not going to sell anything, So it ended up that just a few days before, we had to tell them how many people we were.
10 days before the Seder.
10 days before. And we prayed about it, and we go, what? Talking to the Lord, He's told us to sell the whole thing out, over 200 people.
I think we had only sold 50 tickets.
We'd only sold 50.
We would have had to pay for 150 meals.
Wow. Okay.
And so after we just stepped out in faith and told them, there was a reporter that wanted to know about our family, because we were the only Jewish family, in town. So they did a article on us, and it was so popular. People were so excited about that. They came back and did one about the Passover Seder that we're having.
Wow.
Well, that, of course, got it out there to everybody. And so all these secular, Germans, were coming.
Wow.
So
Actually, it was mostly secular, because a lot of our friends who were believers wanted to come, but there was this huge German-wide conference that weekend. And they were a lot of them were gone. And
so the whole week I'm bugging the chef, making sure, this is a Passover. We can't have all this, wheat and yeast and all this stuff, So, so we ended up having the Passover Seder, and we did dancing, and we got everybody involved. The gospel was, amazing. It's so evangelistic, the Passover. And so then afterwards, I'm looking down through the table, the banquet hall, looking down there, and I see these big mugs about this tall, and I'm going, beer. How's beer made?
Wheat.
Yeast.
Yeah. Well, you can only go.
Our best laid plans,
Yeah.
But the Lord knew.
Yeah, He did.
That's awesome.
Actually, the hall was only big enough for 200, but an extra 20 people showed up, and so
of course, we
got to find space.
The hotel, we've got to invite them. We don't turn anybody away.
Wow.
Yes.
So they accommodated us.
That's
Good.
beautiful.
That is beautiful.
I love that. What was an outcome that you saw out of that? What was, bringing?
Actually, the few intercessors who were there said it changed the spiritual climate over the region.
Wow.
They said there was a shift
Yeah.
in the spirit after that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I believe it.
And of course, it connected us. Everybody knew us in town,
and
connected us. And so we had a living room that could hold 140 people.
110.
110. Anyway, it was huge.
But that in Germany, in Munich, Germany, just north of town, that's like unheard of.
Oh, yeah.
That thing is very scaled down in European homes.
Yeah.
So we opened our home for people to come to the table, basically.
Yeah.
I love it.
For Shabbat and for all the feasts. And we would teach and have worship, and then, of course, food. Got it. Every one of our meetings we call it a pot blessing, because we don't believe in luck.
Yeah. I love that. I'm just your story, even how just one, because of just your culture and everything that you've done, like the table has been an integral part in every part of your life, like inviting people to the table, having people around your table, connecting to people. We like to say practicing the gift of just the presence of being there and having just connection. I love that. It's literally a way of life. It's literally for you guys. This is It's how you
And,
live life.
you know, we've modified it, you know, since as we've gone on and learned,
Yeah.
you know, so many things, you know, like you know, now we do an appreciation story.
Yeah.
And we tell people this is because we made it just part of our lives. It's an appreciation story, you know, come into his presence with Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A better way to start, you know, sitting on Friday night, you know.
Yeah.
And then we check in, you know,
Yep.
with each
Yep.
other. And
Because
so it's all
doesn't
very
take long.
natural.
It doesn't take long to teach that.
No.
And what I like about it is, you know, growing up in the Jewish world, we fetch a lot. We complain.
Mhm.
We're really good at complaining. Just look at the Bible.
World experts.
And
World
and so,
experts.
yeah, pretty
I
much.
love it.
I like to say though that you know, doing an appreciation story or checking in and saying what you're grateful for.
Yeah.
It's like, this is how to start Shabbat. And we'll get to the complaining later.
Right, yeah.
but at least it sets the tone.
Yeah, sets the tone. I love that. Oh, that's great.
We'll
That
get
is
to the
hilarious.
complaining later.
We'll get to the
we will.
complaining later. We save that for
Say
dessert.
that for
Yeah,
dessert.
we'll save that for dessert.
Yeah.
I love that. So
That's hilarious.
When we start talking politics.
Yeah.
right.
Hilarious.
So I'm curious, how has incorporating those two elements of just appreciation and check-in, because those are things that we also do around our table, at our community table. How has that changed maybe the flow or what even happens at your table? So like when you didn't do that as a practice, a rhythm, as a intentional thing, what was, what was happening there? And then has there been a shift or a change that you've noticed in people and even what happens around your table once you started incorporating those couple rhythms, simple rhythms, like you said?
Yeah. Well, we're much more vulnerable, you know, and transparent.
Mhm.
And,
More
you know,
real.
more real, and
That's-
really,
yeah.
you know, connecting with one another.
Mhm.
And then another thing, you know, that it's kind of subtle, but it's like I saw Janelle, you know, asking these, you know, these questions. Well, how did that make you feel? Or what, you know, following up and saying, well, you know, like labeling it. Well, it seems like you're saying such and such, but the point is about listening, using listening skills.
Yeah.
And so when you combine the appreciation stories and checking in, and then you really are listening, that changes the whole dynamic on the table.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people feel, they say that when you really feel listened to, you it's like you feel loved.
Mhm.
You know?
Like there's a movement here in Israel. It's called Welcoming the King of Glory. And it was in, I guess, 2017, a group of islanders from the Pacific Islands, different islands, got together, came to Israel, and they called for many congregational and ministry leaders to come together and to have a meeting, to come to the table together. And so we did, and we're kind of curious, like, who are these people? What do you want? And so then when the time came for them to address the group, we were invited to this meeting. It was mainly prophetic types. And when the elders from the Pacific Islands got up to speak, they said, the first thing they said is, we want to have a conference here in Israel. So our friend Avi Mizrahi from Tel Aviv, he was kind of spearheading this. And we all just looked at them incredulously and said, well, go ahead, have a conference. Everybody else does. Has nothing to do with us, you know, the Jewish believers in the land, but, you know, have your conference and enjoy, book a hotel. And they said, no, you don't understand. We have protocols. The protocols in the islands are, if we feel like we need to go to this village and maybe have a market day or do some transactions, we go to the elders with respect and honor, and we submit the request to them, and then we assist them.
Wow.
And so that's what they said. We want to have a conference, but we want you to lead it, and we will support you. We'll come alongside you.
Wow.
And we were all like in shock. We never heard of such a thing before.
Wow.
And so the whole institution of this conference. So we ended up having a conference in 2018 and 19, and then Corona hit, and so that put everything to a stop. But it solidified the local believers to such, and mainly leaders, to such a point of where we started having meetings on Zoom. Initially, weren't allowed to meet. Then, as soon as we could, we started meeting in person. And now we meet in person once a month at different congregations. And it always involves coming to the table. Always. There's always a time of worship, and then just sharing, and then waiting on the Lord together. And then we always have a meal together. And this time we just had it a few days ago in Akko. And there are many Arab believers who are now part of this as well. And, I have a lot of dreams. And so I get contacted by young Israelis who are also having dreams and visions. But they feel shut down because when they come to their leaders and say, I'm having dreams, and a lot of leaders still to this day say, no, it's not important, put it away. So they see my dreams that are published in this Kehila News publication. So one of them is a young Arab man who called me. It's just a sweet, sweet guy. So when I came up to share, the Lord really put this on my heart, that it never hit me before, but I was always focused on the Jewish believers. But he's pouring, in Joel 2:28.
Yeah.
In the last days, I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh.
Yeah.
Your young men will have visions. Your old men will dream dreams, and your sons and daughters, of course, will prophesy. And so I brought him up to just lay hands on him in front of everybody and ask for prayer for the young Arabs.
Wow.
In the Arab culture, to start having dreams and visions and to come out and share them. And then
actually, I ended up having the meal with this young man and his father. And he had a disease that was just, they said it was 1 in a million. It was, he died almost, several times. It was just the whole thing. But as he's telling me the story, I'm really paying attention, and I'm just, asking curious questions and really I'm right there. And then it was, and ask him, well, tell me more about that, and just, and so just sitting around there at the table, and then really, and they, both of them, because, the dad, it was, the COVID had come right when the day that he had gone into the hospital, and he was in the hospital with his son, and they he couldn't get out of the hospital, the dad, for 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
He was stuck in there with him. So he was, it was his story too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the connection that I made, sitting around the table and eating, but incorporating, really listening.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's so powerful. I felt like they were brothers when we finished,
Yeah, they felt that too. I really saw the way they reacted.
Yeah, they were giving me hugs.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Come, we'll make you a meal.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Sit at the table.
Of course, the Arab culture, there's so much hospitality. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But I felt like this is the solution to peace in the Middle East.
Yeah. The table.
And sitting around the table.
And
listening to one another.
Yeah. And wow. It's that simple. You've been listening to the Table and Well podcast. New episodes stream every Tuesday. To begin your journey to relational health, please go to tableandwellco.com and join our new online community. Or you can sign up for Connections 101, formerly called Community 101. Again, we invite you to join our online community at tableandwellco.com.